Hello everyone and welcome. Today I will be painting the first mini-boss, the Kobold Dragonlord Merak. For the skin I went with the same procedure as the other kobolds. First the base coat of light green, and later I will be washing it with a very diluted gold color. This one is a much more detailed model than the previous ones. There were many details that had to be painted separately, like vambraces or hands. It was really fun to paint, but at the same time, very delicate, painstaking process. Because I did not want to have to do the skin multiple times, I tried to take as much care as possible while painting it, and try to get the very good coverage in one coat for the base light green. Sometimes you will see a lot of paint on my brush, and sometimes only just the tiniest amount on the tip of the brush. Now, I know you're supposed to use very little to multiple passes, but I tend to use the same brush to also mix my paints, and sometimes it's just easier, especially when you have large areas of the miniature, to get rid of all the paint and then wash your brush. And I'm also sort of like a cheapskate, and I really don't like to waste paint. I encountered a small problem with my camera while filming this miniature. A few steps were skipped. But this time I decided to go with a much more lighter color for the leather outfit and use the burnt umber for the leather straps that hold it together. The brighter leather color will make him stand out, and it will also give the impression that his equipment is superior to that of the other kobolds. While this miniature should stand out, it should also have similar elements linking it to the other kobolds. So I went with the same colors for the sword. A mix of red and silver to give it that reddish shine. For some reason, I did not hit the exact same coverage with this mixture of paint as last time. So I had to do multiple passes with the same color over the sword in order to get it to look good enough. A few light touches for the armor. I wanted the shield to really pop out, and in order to do this, I wanted to use the same technique with the sword and the mixing of a color with the metallic paint. Instead of red, I used a bit of purple. Yeah, the paint looks very bright, but I can assure you it dries out much more matte, and in daylight conditions it's a very subtle effect. But under a bright light, the purple shines through quite nicely. I had to be very careful when painting the side, as any slip could easily damage one of the previous layers. Here is what I mean when a very thin paint requires multiple coats in order to fully cover the area. You can clearly see that the paint is somewhat transparent on the shield. This will require a second coat of paint. Again, just a few light touch-ups of the leather. And of the skin, which I said I would not do. And then I realized there were some elbows that were visible, and I painted them all in the same color as the leather. Just making sure that all the transitions are okay and there are no dots or mistakes. Now I use dark umber to highlight all the elements of the leather, such as the edges or the straps or the locking mechanisms or even the pouches on the character. I also use the brown wash, which is a very diluted paint, to cover all the creases and all the nooks and crannies of the leather. I use a small sponge made from packing foam in order to remove the excess brown wash. After the wash, I come back with the original light brown in order to bring back the same color as the rest of the leather. I decided to paint the edges of the backpack as well with the same burnt umber in order to give it a bit of a highlight in reverse. As usual, and my preferred way of doing things, I used lead pilcher for the armor. Not much to be said about this particular miniature armor. Just follow the previous steps, only very careful not to miss all the other layers that have already been painted on. I really liked how the van braces came out with the leather underneath and the armor panels on top. If possible, I will try to do this for all the future miniatures. And even more touches on the leather part. As you can see, I spent a lot of time on this miniature. I think that as a mini boss, he should definitely get a bit more attention than the grunt soldiers. The shield is also made out of two parts, and I really wanted to have a good contrast between the two elements. So I went with the paint gray, which is a very grayish blue hue when it's painted on, but it dries very, very dark. For the raised emblem on the shield, I used a bit of gold, not really washed down, not even diluted a little bit. I wanted it to be as bright and as metallic as possible, something that will really stick out, sort of like the runes on the Duergar shield. the tiny bolts on the shield I used the lead belcher for, but it's a very subtle effect, you can barely even see it. Or at least I can. And with the emblem painted and the gold paint out, it was time to do the skin tone, the final wash with the gold color. I diluted the gold and painted all over the green skin. The hilt of the sword was painted a Dragonlord brass. As I mentioned in the previous Kobold video, the eyes were a pain to paint. While doing it by hand, without any additional assistance, they appeared great. But as soon as I took the final shots for the videos, it came out that I messed up quite a lot around the eyes. And just like I did with the kobolds, I spent several minutes, maybe an hour, painstakingly using my magnifier to get the eyes just right. I used a bit of pure white to highlight the teeth of the kobold. Putting the final touches on the skin with a bit of light green, and finally washing the miniature with Norn oil on the armor parts. At the last minute, I decided to try and add some agrics or shade over the skin to give it a different hue from the other kobolds. Again, this is supposed to be a special character. I don't think I'm bragging when I say that this is my best work so far, and I will let you enjoy the final shots. But if you liked it, please consider subscribing to the channel.